Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hi, Marcela.
How are you all? Great. So we have, I think there's a few more people who will join us. We will record this session and I'll also share it with the other fellows that can make it today. So Joanne, I want to thank you so much for doing this. Joanne Sonenshine is the founder of Connective Impact, and she's a super specialist in partnerships, funding grants, all of this, all of the things that we have a lot of questions about. So I know that this will be a very good session for all of us. Joanne, you can start whenever you're ready. You can share your screen. And guys, if you have any questions, I know that once she's sharing her screen, she won't be able to see the chat. So I guess you can open your microphones or wait, write down your questions and wait until she's finished to ask them, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So Joanne, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcella. And it's lovely to be with all of you this morning. I'm just outside of Washington, D.C., so it is morning for me. I'm sure for some of you, it's other times of the day. So thank you for joining today, wherever you may be coming from. And certainly feel free to jump in with questions at any point. I do have some slides that I will share that take you through kind of a few key points on the concepts of effective partnership for fundraising and just kind of overall partnership strategy to advance your goals. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I always get a little hesitant with the technology, so hopefully this works. So Marcella, can you see?
Yes.
Oops, I don't want to do that. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take myself off video momentarily while I walk through these slides with you, because I'm going to be reading from a few notes. And let me go ahead and get started. So yeah, again, I do want to thank you very much for the time. As I mentioned, I'll be talking a little bit about fundraising, but I'll also be talking about something that I'm assuming you're all familiar with, and that is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. One of the reasons why I'm going to be talking a little bit about partnership and fundraising that kind of refer to the UN SDGs is for two reasons. One, anybody who's working on a social issue or sustainability issue in this day and age is likely familiar with the SDGs. And I like to think that all of the work that we're doing to advance global equity really does help propel the Sustainable Development Goals. Additionally, earlier in the summer, I actually put together a report with some colleagues on how partnerships are helping to advance the SDGs. And I did a webinar earlier in the summer around some of those data points that we collected. And I am going to share a bit of that today because I think it'll be helpful for all of you as you're thinking about partnerships. I did look at some of your backgrounds. You're all coming from really amazing organizations, and I really admire the work that you're doing. So hopefully you find these points helpful. And again, please feel free to jump in with any questions. And I can share the website of the report at the end if you'd like to download the report, but I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So before I get into a lot of the technical stuff, I just want to kind of briefly introduce myself. My name's Joanne Sonenshine. I'm founder of Connective Impact. We are a partnership strategy advisory firm based just outside of Washington, D.C. in Arlington, Virginia. And we are focused on helping companies, international nonprofits, and also donors in some cases partner to deliver around the Sustainable Development Goals and other social and sustainability issues. I've spent the last 20 years working in these areas as well as in policy and international development, and I've also been a fundraiser. So I kind of understand this concept that Fundraising is really about building strong partnerships. I like to think about fundraising as collaboration and not just about seeking funding for the sake of it, but really finding the right type of funding partners who are going to be long-term strategy kind of advocates for you. I've also been working very hard to educate clients and others in this space around this idea of mutual benefit and finding the right fit when you're fundraising. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go as well. So, and as I mentioned, I did want to share some information from a survey that we ran earlier in the summer. We interviewed 20 companies, about 23 actually to be specific, about what makes effective partnerships for advancing their goals. So here's just one summary slide of what the respondents said they're focused on. These are obviously the SDGs. And I wanted to show you this because it just goes to show how diverse the work that some of the biggest companies in the world are focused on. And it's also very encouraging to me that you see a wide breadth of priorities among those who are thinking about partnership and trying to make sure that they advance the goals that are so pertinent to what's going on in the world these days. It's also very clear that to address many of these global challenges, the companies that we talk to are working with a lot of partners. So many of the companies that we talk to have been working with their partners for years. Some of their partnerships are new. And what we learned is that finding the right partner does take experimentation. It takes patience, and it takes being really clear on why partnerships are needed in the first place. I wanted to mention that for those companies working with fewer than 20 companies, which is a good number, about a third, maybe a little bit less than a third, many are concentrating their work with a very few kind of hand-selected partners. And that's important because if you're trying to work with some of the bigger companies out there, whether to access funding or to advance your goals, it's important to think about how you are going to align with them and really be an advocate for their interests as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I like to think about finding the right donor or partner is as kind of like a chase. It can often feel like a game, and it doesn't have to be that way, but the reality is that you probably feel it is that way, and that's very normal. And I think this is very true for organizations of all sizes and scope. Knowing which partners are worthy of engaging is based largely on understanding what their priorities are, just like it's really important to know what your priorities are. And sometimes it's hard to know how to find other organizations to work with or donors to seek unless information is publicly available or you have the right in. Sometimes it feels like you're guessing, and that can be frustrating. So, you have to make sure that you find the right partner who's going to help you make the impact that you're looking for. Finding funding partners, or really partners of any type, can be made easier by knowing the right people inside an organization. And while that isn't always possible, it's important to think about the who do you know concept. It makes it easier for you to kind of sell yourself and your organization to the right decision makers, but it's not always easy to get there. But there is a way to kind of address these issues of the chase and the who do you know. I like to think that finding the right partner, donor, or strategic partner is really about finding an intersection of interests, priorities, and need. It's about aligning visions, being super, super clear on your own mission, and also identifying a specific area of mutual benefit that you think will kind of sell yourself or sell your organization to a prospective partner or donor. So how does this work in practice? And I like to think about it according to this image. If you think about this image and you look at kind of that area in green, that would be agreeing to what this kind of like area of mutual benefit or area of mutual agreement or aligned vision could look like. And the key is to figuring out, how big is it? What shape does it take? how do you kind of find that in the first place? Who leads once you identified that area? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So first, let's talk about effective partnership and how effective partnership works. And the first step that I always recommend is starting with your own priorities. Why do you need partnerships? Why do you need funding? What are you trying to achieve? And I often suggest that you start by considering what you're already doing. What has been successful? How have your efforts to address your goals and objectives already taken you like a certain way? Are you purely looking for funding, or is there some broader need that you're looking for? Maybe you're looking to replicate something that's already working. Maybe you're even looking to work with a competitor. You know, these are the kinds of things that you want to start asking yourself. But then you'll need to think about what your specific gaps are. What are the things, what are the issues, what are the needs that you have that you cannot address alone? If it's pure funding, then it's pure funding. Is it funding plus technical assistance? Is it, you know, funding for one project, but not maybe several other projects? So I'm looking, I see that there's, oh, okay. I saw that there was a couple chat messages, so I just paused to look at those. So yeah, once you have your gaps, then you want to start thinking about how you're going to fill in those gaps. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to take the time to go through your priorities, to understand what's working well, to think to yourself about, you know, where there are specific needs, and being very clear on what your gaps look like, what the short, medium, and long-term gaps look like. Because there's going to be urgent needs and then there's going to be longer term needs. And obviously you're going to want to be prioritizing those more urgent issues while you're thinking long-term at the same time, which can be somewhat challenging. Now, I will say the type of partners that you seek will always depend on how you rank those gaps, those needs. If you're only looking for funders, obviously you're going to only be looking at those who provide funding. But if you're looking for implementation support or support within your own operations or policy support in addition to fundraising, then you might need to start to think creatively about how different types of organizations could help you achieve your goals. So once you've kind of settled on the why, the question of why you are partnering, the goals that you've set, the gaps that you've identified, next, you need to think about finding the right partners to help you fill those gaps. For this step, you'll rely upon a term that I really believe very strongly in, and it's comparative advantage. And I'm an economist, so I like to talk about economic terms quite often. But if you're not as familiar with the concept of comparative advantage, it's the ability of an individual or group to carry out a particular economic activity more efficiently than maybe another activity. So it's really thinking about complementarity. And I like to sometimes give examples where if you're really good at, let's say, preparing policy briefs and you're a policy advocacy organization, you are not going to necessarily be as good at doing, irrigation pump work in a rural agricultural environment. But let's say you have an opportunity to seek funding that allows you to provide policy guidance in a country where the projects and priorities are around rural agriculture. Your comparative advantage to a potential partner or even donor is in the policy space, because that's what you know, that's what you're good at, that's what you have a background in, that's what your organization does. But you will need a partner that provides complementary skills, services, knowledge, foundations. So in order to seek funding or to engage on a particular activity, you will have to find the right complementary partners to get you going in the right direction. It could also be that a donor just needs somebody who knows policy, in which case that's your comparative advantage, and that's awesome. But it's just thinking a little bit about what is your comparative advantage? How do you set yourself apart in situations where you are looking for a partner or for funding or a combination of both? And the exercise of identifying your comparative advantage is really kind of drilling into the needs you have, certainly, but also where you can fill in gaps of a prospective partner. So again, think about this idea of mutual benefit and finding that point of intersection we talked about earlier. Is there a partner that you can work with where together you might be able to seek funding that you may not be able to do on your own? Is there a donor that's looking for technical expertise that you have to offer, and maybe there's opportunities to work with that donor? So be super creative and think about, again, what you provide that's valuable and what you need that's going to be useful to you. And finding this kind of point of intersection is going to be where all of the magic happens. Now, I will say, in my view, comparative advantage is probably the most critical element when thinking about finding the right partner, finding funding, finding success in working in a crowded environment. Because if you land on a partnership or land in a scenario where you're simply partnering because you think you have to, and not because there's complementary opportunities there, it's not going to last. So kind of taking us back to some of those questions that we asked to our big companies as part of our SDG study, we asked them what makes partnerships more effective. And you can see some of the answers on the screen. But one trend I noticed throughout is an interest in speed, efficiency, and being proactive. And I truly believe that those three things, being fast, efficient, and proactive, are much easier when you think about it from a perspective of comparative advantage. So next I want to move on to this discussion of which partner and how you know that they're the right partner. We talked about why, we talked about how, now let's talk about the who. So as you're considering, again, what needs you have, then you start to evaluate there's mass universe of potential partners. So if you're thinking about funders, obviously it's incredibly broad and somewhat overwhelming to think about every potential funder you can approach. If you're thinking about partnerships, it's the same thing. Again, very similar approaches, whether you're looking for a partner to advise you, to work with you, to help you fundraise. Partnerships really are about narrowing in on what's your need, what value do you bring. And I put this up on the screen. This is just like the tip of the iceberg of the type of partnerships that are out there. Even just in fundraising, there's a whole host of funding types. So there's government, kind of public funders, there's corporate funders, there's foundations. There's one of the newer kind of tranches of funding that I'm seeing out there is like innovation awards. There's a ton of innovation awards from companies, collaborative programs that are multiple foundations or multiple donors coming together to, find really innovative ideas. There's opportunities in supply chains if you work in goods and services to get funding from partners that you work with to kind of support supply chain activities. There's even opportunities to work with your competitors to seek funding. And one trend that I'm seeing quite a lot of is, particularly in the public funding space, is government donors looking for companies, social enterprises, other type of kind of innovative organizations that are seeking ways to work with their competitors to kind of come to public donors with new ideas. And a lot of the governments, the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, are asking for private sector ideas put forth. So, if you are a social enterprise, if you are working for a company in any way, shape, or form, and you've got ideas that could be intriguing to a donor, and you're not quite sure if your idea is suitable by itself, find another company that's working in a similar space and see if they might want to go in with you on a proposal or project idea. That's just one example of some of the trends that I'm seeing out there. And I can't overemphasize enough how important it is to just think a little bit outside of the box and think about partnership as it relates to fundraising.
Joan?
Yes.
Joan, I have one question. So regarding in the competitive advantage and the gap perspective you were mentioning, I was thinking, okay, if we are gonna think about a partnership with an organization, it will be more, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, please. From my understanding is that if you are gonna do a partnership, so you can be kind of more, like transparent, like sharing your gaps, your real gaps, and saying, okay, this is what I need. This is where you can help our organization, and this is how we can support yours.
Right.
But what happens when you are talking to an organization that is going to fund you? So in that perspective, sometimes sharing your gap could be understood like sharing your weaknesses, and depending on the grant provided, I mean, it could be 10K, and it's maybe you can be more, like transparent, saying, okay, this is what I need, this is
Right.
this is what I need this for. But what if you are you are trying to access a fund bigger than that? In that way, saying your full gaps, it's like, okay, are they gonna trust me a big amount of funds if I'm gonna share something that could be perceived as weaknesses? What do you
Right.
think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that many times. So I appreciate you raising that issue. I think we're in a different time. I would say maybe about 5 years ago, that may have been the case, where if you shared your gaps and your needs, or I don't like the term weaknesses, because I actually think every organization should be centered around their strengths and admit that maybe there are some needs that they have. But I think weaknesses sounds a little bit more negative, and so I prefer not to use that term. But I would say maybe 5 years ago, donors, it was very, very black and white. Like, a donor would have a proposal, they would have a scope that they were looking for, and a grantee either fit that scope or they didn't. And if your needs, were greater than the competitor's needs, that those who are also seeking funding from that donor, then it would be challenging for that donor to feel confident funding you. That's how things were, I think, in the past. Where we are moving now is donors want this dialogue with those they're funding to be about co-creation and engagement and collaboration and partnership. Not always, but often. And so if I'm an organization looking for funding, then it's up to me to be super honest about what I can or cannot deliver, and open yourself up to the idea that there are things that your organization may not be able to deliver on. But what you could do is say to a donor, we know that we need support around this issue, or around this tactic, or around this concept, but we are very open to partnership and engagement with you, our donor, prospective donor, or others in our space, to ensure that we provide a holistic solution, or a comprehensive solution. So I think nowadays, not every donor, but many donors are looking to have an honest conversation. And I think it does set you apart if you talk in that way.
Got it. So if I understand well, so a good strategy will be, if we are in that scenario, we could do something like, okay, I'm applying for this, and even though I have this gap, I already have a partnership with another organization, and together, we can deal in a more, more precisely way against this problematic or something like that.
Yes.
So because of that partnership, the fund that you can provide us, it's gonna be more. It's gonna be more. I don't know. The probabilities of success are gonna be higher.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes,
All
that's
right.
that's a perfect way to state it. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions before I keep going?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, my name is Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing this. I do have a number of concerns. One is going to be like is a question. Another one is like an advice. So I've in the course of sourcing for partners in Nigeria, there's a strategy that we usually use called cost sharing partners, where we get to have partner organizations who they don't necessarily need to bring in funds, but they can give you certain kind of resources.
Right.
So, we were fortunate enough to have like the consulates funding our project for the second round of the year. And the COVID-19 actually disrupted a lot of things, and also the amount of funding that we needed was not what they could provide. So we said, okay, we can improvise this way. But now something happened recently. We had local stakeholders that, because of the study nature of the project, they want to come in and they want to help in the project implementation. They also want to give us certain kind of resources. So in this context, now they are cost sharing partners, because now they want to take out a chunk of burden, from us. In this context now, do we necessarily need to write like a letter informing the consulates that additional organizations would like to support this project?
So great question. I think there's two approaches you can take. It can't hurt to let the consulate know that there's support, in-kind support, resource support, particularly if the consulate, could potentially provide more funds in the future. Because I think if the consulate knows that there's an opportunity to kind of grow their own stake in this project, or their even political stake, that's going to be very helpful for you. So to me, it can't hurt to go ahead and share that. It's good. It's good for the program. I would just say, kind of on the other side, if there's a time frame by which you think the consulate needs to be making decisions about the project, whether it's funding, political support, resource support, maybe wait to share that information until you actually think they need to make a decision, if that makes sense. Because you almost want to use it as a bargaining tool in some way. So, if you think about it, let me go back to that picture that I shared with you. If your project is the red circle and the consulate is the blue circle, it's up to you to figure out that area in green with them, right? And if you can show them that there are already other organizations that believe that area in green is important and provides value and is necessary, then that's going to make the area grow. And that's going to make the consulate or the government's stake in the project even bigger, if that makes sense. So use it as a bargaining tool. Use the time frame that you think is going to be the most useful to the project to present that to them. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I got that.
Please.
Okay.
Yes, please. Yes. Then the second one is, this one is another kind of project, but it's all circling around partnership and funding. In the place where we are, partner organizations actually respect when you are asking for resources, not necessarily money, because a lot of people are asking for money. So you should just have like a competitive advantage that you're not asking for money, you're asking for resources. Now, we have this initiative that we want to create an LMS for teachers. It's like the first of its kind. But now, in as much as it requires technical support, which we are doing from our own end, there's a kind of there's a level, there's a gap we are looking up to fill, and it's only in the academia. Now it's actually called like a verification committee, where we don't just want to launch local content on the LMS, we want it to be verified. We want to cut out teachers plagiarizing other people's work and authenticity. So now in this context, we were thinking of reaching out to universities who can give us some of their teaching staff to help us verify this content. I'm also thinking, I don't know how we're going to pitch it, because I'm sure the university will also be looking at what's in it for them.
Right.
In as much as we need. So I don't know how we can pitch such an initiative that is a win-win thing. They gain, we also gain.
Well, I mean, I think you almost just answered your own question. It's, you know, what the interest is on the part of the university. And so if you can phrase the kind of the sell, or the, you know, yeah, the sell, really, I mean, it's really what it is, in terminology or in words that that kind of resonates with the university, and positions it so that they know what kind of value they can get out of engaging in the right way with you or with this project, then you've done your job, right? The key is to, again, going back to our picture, is to figuring out, you know, if the university is the blue circle and red is the project, then what in that green area is going to allow that the blue circle to want to be part of it. And it's coming up with the right terminology that resonates. It's finding advocates within the university that believe in the project, or that believe that this is the right type of partnership. It's just kind of constantly communicating and not really letting them go, and being very honest about what your needs are and what value you can bring them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we continue on the slides, is being a salesperson of your own value, of your own project's value to your potential partner.
Okay.
So let me keep going, and then because I'm almost done with the slides, if that's okay. And then if there's other questions, let me just go a little bit further. But and I think this actually gets to your question, Amanda, which is, you know, when you're doing this kind of research about how to sell the project or engage with a potential partner, and let me turn my mute off because I'm going to be looking at my notes. You know, this idea of what valuable role you play, what value you bring, is going to be super important. So even if you're just looking for funding, you still play a role to donors, because donors have priorities. Donors have, you know, annual goals that they've set. They are looking for grantees that help them check off a box for their own priorities. So it's really critical to think about the positioning that you have as a benefit to a funder, to a partner. And one thing I'll just mention, and this is probably very straightforward, but using your network, using social media, you know, finding the right people within organizations who are going to want to stand behind the project for you, that's going to be super important, and where research is going to be super important. And here is kind of where we get into that point about, you know, what value are you going to bring to this collaboration? So you're essentially using the red sphere, the red circle in this picture, as your area of expertise, your skill set. And the blue circle is that of your potential partner. I think we've made that really clear here. And once you've identified that area in green, you are then selling that. You are then telling your potential partner, here's what the potential looks like for us to work together. Here's what the future can hold. Here's what a vision can look like. So the other thing that I want to just mention as you're kind of working on this concept, is how important some of these other issues are. So don't wait too long as you're engaging with potential partners, and this is true of funders as well, to address potential roles and responsibilities, because there might be some hesitation on the part of a partner if they think that their lift is going to be too heavy, if they think that there's going to be a burden engaging with you. And I think, Amanda, that could, you know, be a holdup that, you know, the university wonders, are we going to have to work too hard here? So being transparent about what the roles look like, how you're going to share lessons learned, how you're going to talk about successes, be, you know, the positive ways that this partnership can advance the goals that all of you have set individually and together. You also want to start partnerships on equal footing, even with a donor. So having commitments around leadership buy-in and how they're going to talk about the partnership, what the timelines look like, and what, you know, the longevity of the partnership could look like. And one thing I do want to mention is that as you're thinking about potential partnerships, you obviously evaluate partnerships after the partnership has kind of ended, or as you're moving into the tail end of a partnership opportunity. And this is also true of funding opportunities. You go through evaluations and impact evaluations, but it's something to also think about before you get into a partnership or before you advance with a donor. How do you know that they're really the right one? So I did want to just refer you all, there's on our website, there's an partnership impact evaluation guide that we've put up there that just gives you like a couple of things to think about, some of which we've talked about today, that may be helpful as you're thinking about fundraising, as you're thinking about engaging your partner. So I did just want to refer you to that. And I also just want to reiterate how important it is to look at partnership as a true team effort. So again, even if you're just looking for funding, this is teamwork. This is an opportunity to provide value to the donor that you're also getting back from their funding. And, think about it if, like, from a technical perspective, donors often need technical expertise. They need technical experience to show that a project can work. So it's super important to think about the way that you support and guide donors as a strategic partner. I just wanted to show you this quick slide too, which is about going back to the interviews and the biggest challenges in delivering commitments and thinking about partnership. And COVID came up obviously quite a bit given where we are right now. But you can see there's a lot of opportunity here to kind of take some of these challenges and make them into successes. Things like focus, alignment, being very specific about the business case, being very specific about expectations and time frame. So that was something that I did want to share with you. And then the last interview slide I wanted to show is around plans for the future. And given COVID, I thought this was super interesting because this is also very similar to what I'm hearing from the broader donor community, particularly foundations, this idea of collaboration and collective action. So working kind of collaboratively to advance a bigger program than maybe we would have thought of on our own, and designing programs that are really community centric and not maybe just specific to a few individuals, which I'm sure you've probably heard as well. And this idea of innovating and trying new things, being risky, that, we don't really have time to waste. So I am going to open it up to more questions, but I did want to mention one other resource that may be useful to you. And that's we have an online funding and partnerships community, and it's maintained by our team. It's an online community on a secure portal, and it contains resources that include bi-weekly donor, like requests for proposal opportunities from the public sector, foundations, private sector. We also host monthly donor Q&As. We provide intel that we're hearing from donors. It's an opportunity to work with some of our members on proposal development. And so I did just want to mention that in case that's useful. The first month is free. If you go to partneringforimpact.com, you'll learn more about it. But let me pause there and see what other questions you might have. So I'm going to put myself on video. There we go.
Joanne, I think I do have a question. It's Marcella. So what is your suggestion when we don't have any personal connections to, an organization that we think might be a good partner to us?
Yeah, I would say reach out anyway. So I actually do this quite a bit for our clients. I will cold email anybody. And, it doesn't guarantee you're going to hear back from them. But if there's a donor that doesn't accept unsolicited proposals, let's say a foundation donor that on their website it says, we don't accept unsolicited proposals. Going on LinkedIn, going on their website, getting a sense for who might be, a good person to talk to, and just sharing some information. Hey, I'm just reaching out. I just want to share with you, this one pager on our project. I'm not sure if it's a fit, but, I did want to share it with you. I would be very grateful for a few minutes just to understand how you're making decisions about your funding. Are you open to that? You know, in any kind of opportunity for selling your project or your program, it's going to feel a little salesy, but that's okay, because it's your job to seek out, you know, who those potential long-term partners could be. So if you're honest and you say, you know, I don't know if you're the right person to talk to, I'm not sure if, you know, but I want to share this with you because I think this is interesting and useful and would love your thoughts. That's one way, just to kind of cold call. The other thing is that donors are increasingly putting themselves out there. And I don't know if you're noticing that on social media or in, you know, research that you're doing, but I'm finding a lot of donors doing webinars, hosting Q&As. We obviously host them in our community, but they're hosting them in other places, you know, providing FAQs on their website. And I would say just take up every opportunity you can to, even if it's not a donor you're actively trying to engage, it gives you an opportunity to learn about how donors are thinking about funding. And it's a way to kind of educate yourself so that you're in a position to engage when the time is right.
Hi, Joan. It's Olga. Let me turn on the camera.
Hi.
Hello. So I had a question. There's like two more practical things. One is regarding the legal structure. A lot of the foundations want you to be a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, because I haven't registered the organization yet, and I was reading a lot about L3C and nonprofit and just a regular LLC with a B Corp certification. So not a legal advice, but from a foundation perspective, it appears like you can only, in majority of cases, receive a grant if you're a nonprofit, especially when you go through these opportunities on the websites like Candid.
Yeah.
Is that like just my perception? Is it different if you, like, is it even possible for them if you like reach out to them cold call and you're like, hey, I have this project, would they even consider it?
Yeah.
If you're a nonprofit, or if you're not a nonprofit, you're like, absolute no?
No, I think they absolutely would. So in certain situations, like the US government, for example, will often indicate through a proposal request that this is only open to 501c3. And that's becoming more rare. Actually, most donors aren't requiring that as much anymore. And then other times you'll see this proposal is for private sector, nonprofit, social companies, you know. So I think there is an assumption now that most organizations that are looking for funding are across the spectrum. You know, there's big businesses that are looking for funding, smaller businesses, B Corps, and 501c3. So I don't think that's a limiting factor anymore. I don't. It may be a limiting factor in some programs that do need to fund for tax purposes, like here in the US or in Europe. And that might limit some funding. But if I were you, I would set up your company how you want to be operating. And, you know, you certainly don't have to operate as a nonprofit to be a socially advanced organization anymore. So that's not going to limit your funding.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Or resources that would be useful? I've got, I will say if you want to go on our website, we've got some free resources up there. I'm trying to think of what's up there now. I think our SDG report is up there, but some public funding, like a list of a bunch of public funders are up there, and like who's funding the private sector. I do a lot of blog writing on how private sector organizations can get more involved in fundraising. So certainly take a look at the blog. Oh, you're welcome, Jesselina. Amanda, did you have another question?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So I love the class, that's why. So I wanted to ask you from the last statement you said, is it possible that as a nonprofit you can have a revenue model, like a social model where you design programs that people pay at a minimal rate?
So design social programs that people pay at the minimum rate? Is that
I'm asking that as a non-profit,
Yeah.
can one have a revenue model apart from getting money from donors? Can you have a revenue model where you design projects that people need to pay at a minimum rate or fee?
I see, like a fee for service.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, a client of mine is a very large nonprofit, 501c3, working in, 30 countries. And they actually created a fee for service model where they do two things. They charge almost like a consultant on the ground for their technical assistance and things like that. So that's been very successful for them. And they charge often private sector companies, but also they have charged governments. And the governments pay them like a business. And they are able to do that in certain places. And then the other thing that I've seen is where they're charging for an actual program, like membership fees or an entrance fee or a participation fee. And I've seen that work very well. So I think it just depends on, your organization's bylaws and some of the laws where you're registered as a nonprofit. And if that's allowed, I've seen that happen quite a bit, and it's happening increasingly well that nonprofits can charge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay.
Oh, just to add, Amanda, Yunus and You, for example, is registered as a 501c3 in the US, and we do run programs similar to, the fellowship program, and we charge or other like big organizations for it. So that's how fellows don't pay for the support, but someone is paying for to cover our costs. So we are like a nonprofit, registered as a nonprofit, but we do charge for our services. So I don't know if our example helps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Joanne. Nobody has any other questions. This is the moment for it.
You can always email me anytime.
So if there's not any other questions, Joanne, I want to thank you so much for your time. I think this was very helpful. In the end, I think it's all about working, putting the effort into, looking for the organizations and doing our part in the research, and just like having no shame in reaching out to foundations and organizations that we think might be a good fit, right?
Absolutely. Be proactive, be aggressive. Life is too short. You got to keep things moving and make a difference. So absolutely.
Exactly. So thank you so much for your time. I think we can wrap up a few minutes earlier. But again, I'll send you all the recording for this session. You have Joanne's email. You can go into her website and look for more information. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Best of luck.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.